Many teen movies, there is often a stock gay best friend character who perpetuates homophobic stereotypes. These stereotypes include gay men being extremely feminine, lesbian women being extremely masculine, and having most of the jokes center around their homosexuality. These stereotypes have established a caricature of the LGBTQIA community that members find difficult to separate themselves from. We are here today because we want you to understand and hear the truth. Homophobia, the irrational hatred of or prejudice against those who are not heterosexual. Transphobia, the irrational hatred or prejudice against those who are not cisgender, such as transgender, gender fluid, or non-binary people. Stereotypes, an oversimplified and exaggerated image or idea about a particular type of person, in this case, the LGBTQIA community. All of these things are strong but often subtle parts of today's society that cause great harm to the LGBTQIA community. Now let's begin. When I first came out to my parents as bisexual, they became extremely worried for my safety and my ability to openly express my sexuality. This is because they know that over 25% of homosexual people experience workplace discrimination based on their sexuality, and that over 70% of homosexual people have at some point feared that harm would come to them based on their sexuality. Now let me ask the youth, how have you seen the LGBTQIA community disrespected in discrete ways?
I have seen the community disrespected in discrete ways when during Pride Month, people throw straight pride parades to make discreet swipes at the LGBTQ community.
Often I hear people use the word gay with their friends to refer to something as bad. This kind of disrespect has been going on for so long that people don't think of it as normal. Although they think they're being funny, they're giving the word gay a bad connotation.
In my experience, the most common discrete ways the LGBTQIA community has been disrespected is through the disregard for the way people of the community would like to identify. I've witnessed occasions where it was a mistake, but I've often seen people not care and continue to disrespect people in the way that they have identified by not addressing them by the way that they feel most comfortable.
Through my experiences through school and social media apps, I have also been seeing people disrespecting a person's pronouns by calling them the wrong pronouns and making fun of their appearance, which is really messed up.
I have seen discreet disrespect to the LGBTQ community when a person who is transgender, a lot of people would continue to call the person with incorrect pronouns, and when they know that they have transitioned into a different gender.
In my experience as a queer student in a rural high school, you see it happen every day. Whether a student says something or a teacher steps out of line, it happens all the time. Just the other day, I was talking to my AP government teacher, and it was about the new horribly transphobic law Alabama just passed about trans kids and procedures. But in the midst of talking about this, he brings up Caitlyn Jenner, who he knows is a trans person. But as he starts talking about her, he dead names her and refers to her as he, him. And the fact that he brought up a trans individual in a conversation about trans rights, it was as if he was being transphobic without realizing it. And in a way, it was discreet enough for me to think, is this because he's too old to understand, or is he actually being transphobic? And this stuff happens all the time, and it's really frustrating.
I have seen institutions disrespect the LGBTQ community when services online do not offer ways for people to identify differently if they choose to.
So personally, I've seen them disrespected through my schools through like the discreet use of slurs or like people whispering things under their breath or people disgrading the accomplishments of famous people who happen to be from the community purely just because they come from the community when comparing them to those who don't.
Whenever I attend a meeting where we introduce ourselves with our pronouns, I often hear people scoff at the idea and disregard the importance of pronoun usage. This usually comes in the form of jokes such as, "My pronouns are normal," "Can't you tell I'm a guy?" or the classic, "I identify as an attack helicopter." Very often, the adults in the room do little to stop these jokes from happening and sometimes perpetuate the jokes themselves. Now let me ask the youth, how have you seen institutions disregard pronouns or the LGBTQIA+ community?
When I was in middle school, I took a health class, and in one unit, we were educated on the LGBTQ community. When learning about it, we learned terms that people identify with, and this was nice until my peers began to make jokes about it. Teachers didn't really stop this from happening, and it felt as if a lesson that was meant to educate us just added fuel to the fire and made it negative.
I read an article about the industry Chick-fil-A and how they donated to an anti-LGBTQ plus group, which then thankfully they stopped donating to that anti-gay group.
So personally, I've seen specifically politicians do this when they basically just switch sides just because they see that the public has supported the community or hasn't in certain years, or for specific Trump, within like the first few years of his presidency, made a very transphobic law that banned people from joining the military if they were trans, and did many other laws that hurt the community. But I see that through politics all the time.
LGBTQI individuals are always being disregarded in any given situation. Around every corner, there's always going to be someone doing something to make it harder on the community. Whether that's through gay panic laws or schools not being supportive of name changes and transitions, there is always something that needs to be worked on. But I think one of the things that collectively needs more work on is sex education. American schools continually show that they lack the ability to show appropriate sex education classes, not only for straight students, but especially for queer students as well. I was lucky enough to have had a responsible teacher who identifies as queer herself teach a health class that on sex education that was inclusive and informative, but I know that others aren't so lucky as I was. LGBTQ youth need inclusive sex education to both have representation in the classroom and positive examples in safe sex. In 2015, GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, found that only 12% of LGBTQ students had health classes that included positive representation in same-sex education.
In some of my classes, there are transgender people who openly tell the class in the school that they have transitioned. However, many teachers and sometimes students will accidentally call them by the wrong pronouns. Even if it is a mistake, calling a person by the wrong pronouns can bring a lot of unwanted pain to them.
Up until now, in every school I've been in, there hasn't been any effort to ask or even consider students' preferred pronouns. This is a disservice to those who are misgendered often, and there needs to be more initiative on the school's part to fix these issues.
In many teen movies, there is often a stock gay best friend character who perpetuates homophobic stereotypes. These stereotypes include gay men being extremely feminine, lesbian women being extremely masculine, and having most of the jokes center around their homosexuality. These stereotypes have established a caricature of the LGBTQIA+ community that members find difficult to separate themselves from. Now let me ask the youth, how have you seen the stereotypes of the LGBTQIA+ community being perpetuated?
Through my experience in school or on social media, I see certain people that will use or normalize inappropriate slurs, and I think it's just terrible.
I have seen many movies and TV shows that show people of the LGBTQ+ community, especially gay men, as very flamboyant. However, not all gay men are flamboyant or act in a feminine way. And if we want the LGBTQ+ community to have the support that they so rightfully deserve, then we need to get rid of our one-track minds.
I've witnessed people assume people's sexual orientation simply based on the way the person acts, looks, or even dresses. This is very common, and a lot of times it's just brushed over, when the fact that it's so regular is what's wrong.
I've seen this occur when it comes to like gender norms and how like what girls are supposed to like and what guys are supposed to like, which doesn't even really leave room for non-binary individuals. And I've seen this perpetuated in classes, I've seen this in social media, I've seen this in general society.
I have seen LGBTQ+ stereotypes perpetuated through hateful comments, often posted on posts that are about equality.
Queer stereotypes have been clear throughout media, starting from the early 2000s to present day. and we see damaging portrayals of queer people in movies, shows, and social media in general. One of the more recent stereotypes that I and other non-binary people have noticed is the representation of non-binary characters as non-human beings. Cartoons that have non-binary characters often turn them into robots, shapeshifters, or other genderless creatures. And as much as we love these characters a lot, we need more humane non-binary representation so that our identities aren't perpetuated as non-human or robotic.
In entertainment such as TV, movies, or social media, gay men are perceived as only feminine, thus perpetuating the notion that masculine gay men don't exist. This is just one of the stereotypes that the media pushes forward about the LGBTQIA community.
Now that we've gotten answers to all of these questions, we have time for an open forum discussion. Rachel, one thing that I noticed when you talked about how cartoons talk about non-binary or other non-cisgender people as being cartoons, one thing that's stood out to me was when I saw the movie Onward, the Pixar movie, and it was the first lesbian character ever in a movie. It was like some weird monstrous unicorn thing, and I just thought that was a really weird way for them to just introduce the first openly LGBTQIA plus character. So what do you think of that?
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. I was also a little bit upset with the movie Onward for doing that. Another example of this is in anime. There is a show, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but it has a bunch of space people who go out to different planets and fight evil. And they have a shapeshifter who is out as non-binary. The creators have confirmed it. And that's the only non-binary character that they seem to have, and they give it to a shapeshifter. It's like we love these characters so much, but at the same time, we would appreciate more humane representation.
And I will say, like, when people bring up these concerns from the community and allies of the community bring up these concerns, they're always brushed off as sensitive or snowflakes in today's culture. And I think that's really disrespectful because they are very valid concerns.
Yeah, and I think that kind of connects to what Adam and Michelle touched on in terms of media, which really plays a big role in society today in influencing a lot of people's mindsets. And for media to disrespect the LGBTQ community in these ways really affects society in a negative way.
It also worries me a little bit that like the portrayal of LGBTQ plus characters in kids movies is in such a like not even purposely derogatory way, but just it still is derogatory. And what are kids gonna think if their first experience seeing a lesbian character is in a kind of non-human monstrous creature? Like what is that gonna say about the community as a whole?
I agree, but I think the first time that I ever saw a character from the community was in Steven Universe. One of the main reasons that I even loved the show is because of the amount of representation they had. But I wonder sometimes, like, people from the community, like when they see these inhuman creatures who are supposed to be representing what they think they are, like I'm assuming like this person is young if they're watching shows like this, right? And then they feel like they're not normal, and that can cause mental health problems in the future. And so it's really detrimental.
And that you bring up a really good point of it not seeming normal. And that's only pushed further along when we go into our school settings and things like health education is not allowed, but also just most likely not there for people of LGBTQ community. And that kind of just pushes the norm of it not being normal, I guess.
Yeah, to connect to that, when I'm in like my sex education class, there are times when people who are part of that community actually just bring up the fact that the teachers aren't talking about the different ways that these things should be happening, and everything's just a mess because they want to see that representation being portrayed properly.
And to add on that, I've noticed recently many states have been trying to pass laws that are allowing people to exempt themselves or their kids from this in a way to try to avoid it, because they think that it's something that they should be able to avoid, even though it is important and that they should be a part of.
It truly is quite troubling the amount of states that are passing laws that are affecting the LGBTQ community. As I brought up earlier, Alabama just passed a very transphobic law that makes it so it is illegal to offer any sort of hormone therapy or gender therapy to kids 19 and younger. And it is so frustrating to see these things continuously be passed in law enforcement just to negatively affect the community. There seems to be no sort of intelligence that goes into these laws or any means of trying to accept the LGBTQ community. It's like they're, doing it on purpose.
I completely agree. And to tie like the points of education and states not listening together, like if people just educated themselves, they would understand. Like I've heard several people thinking that if a person is a child of two people from the community, then they will automatically be a part of the community. Like that's just going to transfer over. And that just creates there's just a lot of fear mongering that occurs from politics and social media of those who are homophobic, transphobic, etc. And I think if people educated themselves more, then there wouldn't be such ignorance, obviously.
Yeah, and with education, as well as the teachers taking the initiative to combat any disrespect that happens in classes, because like I said earlier, I did get taught about some of these things in my middle school, but my peers turned it into a joke and my teachers didn't do much to help in that area. And I think teachers and any educators who educate on this topic need to stop the disrespect in its track before it gets worse.
I definitely agree that the problem solving for this definitely has to come from the top, because we as young people can keep talking and do whatever we want. But at the end of the day, it's never going to stop if educators and legislatures and other people in power don't do anything about it. So we can't wait until we, are old enough to get into those positions of power. It needs to happen now. That was a great discussion. And in conclusion, homophobia and transphobia are still prevalent issues in today's society. Only by addressing these problems through education and understanding can we change things for the better. Thank you.